Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tycos. Over the past 5 decades, federal research and development spending as a share of our GDP has plunged from around 1.86% in the mid-1960s to about 0.66% today. During roughly the same period, America's global manufacturing share has dropped from around 45% in the 1950s to just 17% today. Even our Export Complexity Index, ECI, which gauges how advanced our exports are, has been slipping. In today's video, we'll examine how these trends intertwine and what they mean for the troubling loss of America's manufacturing edge. First, let's take a look at the global manufacturing output share of the Big Seven countries over the past 200 plus years. During the mid-18th century, China and India dominated manufacturing output, producing handmade goods at an astonishing rate, and together they held more than 55% of global manufacturing output. That was the state of the world just before the Industrial Revolution truly kicked in. However, shortly after this, the British East India Company took control of India circa 1757, forcing them to take a back seat as the Industrial Revolution began in Britain. China managed to hold the top spot in manufacturing production up until about 1860, but its isolationist policies, government corruption, and rebellions quickly spread across the country and they watched their manufacturing dominance fade. The Industrial Revolution provided most of Europe the innovation capability to expand their manufacturing production. By 1860, Britain held the top spot, owning over 23% of the world's manufacturing output. This was the Industrial Revolution. The United States, a relatively new country at that time, followed Europe's lead and joined the Industrial Revolution. Yet they struggled to keep up with Britain. But as we now know from earlier videos, the utilization of the tariff and crucial R&D spending within the United States allowed it to take over, and as we entered the 20th century, the U.S. became not only the largest manufacturing nation in the world, but the largest economy in the world, reaching a peak manufacturing share of 45% following World War II. As we headed into the 1960s and 70s, the United States started to take this dominance for granted as businesses began outsourcing for cheaper manufacturing costs. Products on the shelf in U.S. stores went from made in America to made in Japan, as Japan managed to overtake Western technology, especially in automobiles. Japan then found themselves in the midst of its own financial crisis in the late 1990s, and their overall economy ground to a halt, leaving room for China to claw their way back to the top after well over a century and a half of lagging behind. By the early 2000s, China had been allowed into the World Trade Organization. We were instrumental in opening that access. And its economy took off. And other countries began outsourcing to China, and that country began producing world-beating manufactured goods, growing their global manufacturing output share from 7% in 2000 to 29% today. As China's economy begins to show signs of weakening, and as trade disputes begin to impact its dominance, the question becomes, can U.S. manufacturing stage a comeback? A key measure of manufacturing prowess is the Export Complexity Index, developed by MIT's Observatory of Economic Complexity. The ECI evaluates how advanced a country's exports are, for instance, high-end medical devices, specialized robotics, or sophisticated computing equipment. Historically, the U.S. excelled here, but recent data reveals a worrying trend. The U.S., UK, and France ECI scores have all slipped from 1.66, 1.62, and 1.41 respectively in 1998 to 1.5, 1.5, and 1.34 respectively in 2023. It's not a big drop, but it's a drop. Meanwhile, Japan and Germany scores have gone from 1.62 and 1.71, respectively, in 1998 to 2.07 and 1.79, respectively, in 2023. That being said, Germany's scores have been trending down in recent years, and it's facing a manufacturing crisis because of its overdependence on Russian energy. China's and India's scores, though lower overall, have climbed from negative 0.43 and negative 0.08, respectively, in 1998 to a really extraordinary 1.16 and 0.65, respectively, in 2023. That's truly extraordinary progress. Why does this matter? Producing advanced good typically leads to high skill, high wage jobs, driving both short-term economic growth and long-term competitiveness. Yet creating these products requires extensive research, which many companies can't afford alone. Government programs, especially at agencies like the NIH, NSF, and DoD, have historically supported foundational breakthrough research, paving the way for breakthroughs in biotech, supercomputing, artificial intelligence, and any number of other high-tech disciplines. As federal R&D budgets shrink, America's capacity to lead in these areas is compromised, threatening both our manufacturing share and our export complexity. That's all for this week. Next week, we'll dive into advanced manufacturing, exploring how reshoring and renewed government support might restore U.S. leadership in biotech breakthroughs, cutting-edge electronics, and much more. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can find PDFs of our charts in the email and on our website, tycos.com. Thanks.